Hello everyone, welcome back to Craft Aquatic. I'm Matt G. For our very last video of 2019, I thought it would be appropriate to take you on a full tour of our 120-gallon SPS Heavy Mixed Reef Aquarium. It has been some time since we've done an update, and many of you have requested a full tour of this system. So we'll be going into great detail in this video, covering some of the livestock, but mainly the equipment, like filtration, lighting, chemistry, and specific biology that keeps this reef ticking. There are a handful of basic reef keeping principles behind this system, and I generally try to keep things as simple as possible. Some of the equipment has been around for years on various systems, and some of it is newer, but generally I purchase high quality equipment that will last for years, or gear that represents the best value for what I am trying to accomplish with this setup. The actual stand I built myself out of 2x4s. It is extremely overbuilt, and it sits on a polyethylene sheet that protects the wooden floors underneath. The canopy opens from 3 sides, and you suspend each door with these little wires that are hanging off. It allows me to get into the back of the reef structure where there are also a lot of coral that need to be fed and moved around occasionally. On top, we have this blanket that we place in the winter time, and it really keeps the heat in. You can watch the electric bill trickle down after you've placed this up there. Those cables, those AC cables, are for the air system that I'm currently installing on the tank. It's a battery-powered backup air pump. Even though I have the vortex and a battery, there are a lot of fish in this tank, and you really need to make sure that they are getting the oxygen they need when that flow is cut in a power outage. So I send this line down into the overflow. I want to talk about this overflow later, but there's a lot of life in there, so the air keeps that alive as well. And the split from the other half of the line goes directly into the aquarium. There are 2 battery-powered air pumps altogether. And here we have the ice cap battery backup for the MP40 in the center back of the aquarium, and the controller for the Nero 5 on the left side of the aquarium. Inside and underneath the canopy, we have filled in all the gaps with this fine mesh to keep any fish from jumping out. And here we're looking in from the right side of the aquarium, right into the canopy, and you can see how we've hung the lighting system. These are 2 T5 strips by Sunblaster, and in the middle, 2 165-watt Viper Spectra LEDs. From the front, you get a better view of the Sunblaster T5 fixtures and the Viper Spectra LEDs hanging in between. And if you look carefully, you'll see an old school AI Sol Blue that we put on its own timer and use in the evening as a moonlight. All of the lights are hung from the central brace spanning horizontally through the canopy with these water-resistant chains. The Viper Spectra come with some pretty nice mounting hardware, and I just swung those over that same brace. And from underneath, you get a better view of the bulbs, the T5 bulbs, and the LED drivers on those Viper Spectras. And if you look carefully in the edge of those Viper Spectras, you'll see these little LED strips that have been mounted onto them. Those are used in addition to the AI Sol Blue as moonlighting in the evening. As with any established system, you're going to run into a nutrient deficit if you're not constantly feeding your fish. And I'm not always around to feed my fish, so I put this Aheim auto feeder into this feeding ring, this DIY feeding ring, and you can see some GSP growing on there. And it broadcast feeds flakes to the fish 4 times a day. And this has done a pretty good job along with our other feedings of frozen and coral-specific foods to keep nutrients present in the aquarium. The tank is a 120-gallon dual corner overflow made by Red Sea. I chose this configuration for a variety of reasons, two of which are I can grow more invasive colonies of coral isolated on the overflows like GSP and encrusting Montipora. And also I like the way that the two overflows draw your eye into the center of the tank when you're looking from the front. This center brace is part of the frame of the aquarium. It keeps the tank much stronger and allows an area for mounting things. And here's our Piranha Float algae scrubber with a little Trochus snail. This thing is super strong. I've had issues with these things being too weak in the past, and it looks really nice. I like to store the tools we use most in the top portion of the aquarium so they're easy to grab when you need them. This pair of grabbers up front is awesome for keeping your hands out of the aquarium. Moving inside the tank, we have one of our newest pieces of gear, this AI Neuro 5 circulation pump. It's tiny, it's powerful, it's awesome. And on the back wall of the aquarium, we have these two Coralia 3G 1,950 gallon per hour circulation pumps that point in opposite directions. And moving to the upper right of our aquarium, we have this ice cap gyre, which does a pretty good job keeping the surface agitated and oxygen exchange happening up there. Current settings on the gyre to ramp up forward at 70% for 1 minute and reverse at 70% for 30 seconds. And last but not least, our Ecotech MP40, which is our oldest pump and has recently been upgraded to a QD. It's just always done an awesome job, and we place it in the center, low down in this aquarium to push water past that giant bally green slimer. All the pumps together in this tank do an amazing job. As you can see, I use a variety of brands, and I mix them up because they're all good at different things, and I want to fill in all the gaps of flow in this aquarium. I feel like we've done a good job accomplishing that. For me, when it comes to equipment, I tend to focus the most on great quality circulation pumps. I do not want them to fail, and I do not want flow to be the weakest link in the chain in any system that I run, which is especially why the CJ Synchro Silent 3 return pump was chosen with the utmost quality, value, and reliability in mind. This is the Coral View lens that I won at the Manhattan Reef Swap raffle. It's been really neat for observing coral up close, but mostly it's a nice little thing to have on the tank for company when they come over. It seems to be the first thing they go to. The stand is built from 2x4s and is a little bit lower than most because I do like looking down at the coral at an angle. And it was built in a way that it would just be inconspicuous. There's interior mounted hinges to keep the doors hanging off the front in a nice way. And it's really easy to get your arms in there, even though it is a lower stand. I did light it to make it easier to see inside when you're working on the aquarium, and I left the side open. There was originally supposed to be a door here, but it was a lot easier just to leave it open since you don't notice it from the front anyway. And it allows for really easy access to the filter socks. I've had issue in the past with having to reach to the back far corner of underneath my stand to grab a filter sock out, and you end up just not changing them. So this is a lot easier. Dual filter socks, dual overflow coming into the sump, and it's really easy. Here we have the container I use to do water changes, and it's connected directly to the RODI system downstairs with this float switch stopping it, so that whenever I need to do a water change, I can fill it up, throw the salt in, mix it, and use that tube inside to fill the tank back up. I have, ever since keeping a tank with a sump, been a huge fan of having one and keeping the equipment out of the way, out of the tank, tucked underneath, and a nice place to work. This stand is actually built to be waterproof up to 2 inches inside, so that if there is a leak, it can hold it in the tub in the bottom. The first thing you see in the stand is this eShop's top-off reservoir, which is sort of a buffer between the RODI system in the basement and the tank. The RODI is on a timer that comes on for a half hour each day that can be stopped by this float valve that triggers a pressure switch in the basement. Here we have 2 cutoff valves, and then right on top is the aqualifter pump, which manages the water coming from the freshwater storage container going directly into the sump. This is relatively standard practice for managing water between an RODI filter and auto top-off system. The protein skimmer that I'm using is a Reef Octopus Classic 110 triple space saver. It really is small, and the pump is actually inside the body of the skimmer. This is a way undersized skimmer for this system, but I really didn't want to rely on the system and the skimmer to be pulling out the majority of the nutrients. And I even put it on a timer here so that it's not on all day long, because I really want to use it to manage nutrient uptake rather than just taking all the nutrients blindly out of the system. So there are other ways that I'll mention later that I do manage nutrients going through the system, and this is just one of the tools in my kit. Next up in the sump is one of my favorite pieces of gear. It's my favorite because it's just simple, but it works. And I've had issue with reactors in the past. This is a GFO reactor by a company, Aquamax. It's the FRSC reactor. And I've had issues with them leaking, or the seals not being right, or, just little design flaws that are such a pain in the butt. And this thing just works. And not only is it a great GFO reactor, but I was able to use the ring inside to add carbon at the top. So like right above the GFO, there's a chamber where I've been able to suspend the carbon. And I can just scoop that out while maintaining the GFO and change carbon once a month and run it all through the same reactor with a Seche 90 gallon per hour pump that's feeding it. No longer do I have to split between 2 reactors or hang something that leaks off the side. Here I wanted to just show off some of the plumbing. I'm pretty proud of it. Not my favorite thing to do, but I wanted to make it look nice. So this is all Schedule 80 with unions at every point so that you could imagine union being useful. And I even used the purple PVC pipe for anything that's a return, and the gray PVC pipe for anything that's coming back to the sump. So as you can see here, this feed back into the sump where the filter socks are is a 90-degree elbow. And that's fine because you're not really having to deal with the resistance coming back. This little tube I'm showing here is just the carbon that is being fed to the filter side of the sump. And I just traced from that bracket that holds the float switches, the 2 float switches, to the solenoid which controls the auto top-off system. That is made by BRS. And here we have one of the 2 ball valves that are connected to the return line. This is for maintenance and also to control flow between the 2 returns if I need to. The peristaltic dosing pump in the back is by BRS, and that's used for the carbon. And the 2 in the front here are for alkalinity and calcium. They are Drew's dosers that I've had for 8 years, and they just don't stop working. Tracing the return line into the sump, here we have the calcium and alkalinity components, which just drip right into the return area, and these BRS Space Saver jugs, which, man, they fit perfectly right into that gap between the sump and the box that holds all of the electronics. Now, speaking of the box that holds the electronics over on the right, that was built specifically to hold anything that cannot have water directly dripped onto it, just to keep it safe and neat and tucked away. So the next thing that we'll be going over is that. And then last but not least, inside the sump is this water alarm. If anything does leak into that little tub area down low, this thing is loud and it will let me know right away. I guess one more thing, we have the return pump, which is that Siche that I mentioned earlier. All of the Schedule 80 PVC coming off the return pump is connected with this silicone hose to reduce vibration, 2 barb fittings, 45-degree angles to reduce back pressure, and a T-fitting that splits off to the 2 returns in the tank. I went with Schedule 80 true unions and valves because they're much less likely to seize up due to calcification. In building this aquarium, we've mainly used Tonga branch, which doesn't leave a lot of surface area for bacteria, so we've added these Marine Pure bioblocks. Now earlier I mentioned that there was a third reason why I choose the dual corner overflows in an aquarium over a beam style animal or a single overflow, and this is it. In these benthic cryptic zones, you get all sorts of sponges growing, especially after the 2-year mark in an aquarium. And these sponges do a much better job filtering out organic matter than anything, any chemical filter, any protein skimmer. They are the reason, in my opinion, that my aquariums can be called established. Once these cryptic zones are set up and just teeming with this sponge life, I can throw all the food I want at this tank and it's going to take up those nutrients. The 2 corner overflows also house the 3 300-watt Aqueon heaters. Best bang for your buck when you're using a controller. On the other side of that box that I showed you on the inside of the tank is the power center of the aquarium. And this is where all the power strips, the controllers, the wall warts, the power supplies, everything is kept out of the way of any water that might drip onto it. And here we have a very old school Reef Keeper 2. I've had this thing for almost 10 years now, and it's still trucking. The only thing that's gone bad on it is the heater control, and that's okay because I use a separate heater controller, that Inkbird right in the corner there, which is also a cooler controller, and I use a fan for that in the summertime. We have a pH controller. Actually, it's just a pH monitor, but it's really important to keep an eye on pH. The ice cap controller for the gyre, and down here the power supplies for the MP40 and another pump. And you know, with this I can still do a standby on the aquarium when I need to feed or change water, anything like that, where I need all the pumps in the aquarium to pause for a moment, including the return pump. The only thing that continues running is the MP40, which is on that ice cap battery that I showed you earlier. And the tank is still in pause here. The MP40 is running off that ice cap battery at a very low rate. It's a good way for me to check to make sure that battery is still working. And it just offers enough flow to push any food, any coral food that I'm adding to the aquarium around the tank. So I usually like target feed the stuff like the Gonopora. And then all the other coral in the tank gets some of the bits that float off. At about a half hour's point after I hit the standby switch, the circulation pump triggers back on, and all the other pumps stay paused for another 10 minutes while the level in the sump and the system's coming up to speed. And then all the circulation pumps come back on, followed by the protein skimmer. I want to make sure the level in the sump is exactly right for the protein skimmer to start running again. So that's the last thing. And then over here, one little last pro tip is that you want to mark your main power cable in the back of the tank so that you know where it is if there's a power outage. And so especially your tank sitter will know where that is when you call them from out of state in a panic. I really hope you enjoyed this tour of the 120-gallon SPS Mixed Reef by Craft Aquatic. This is my personal tank, and I set it up in this home when we moved here 2 years ago. I had a lot of help from a really good friend, and he helped me move my 34-gallon Solana from our apartment in Brooklyn all the way to the Hudson Valley. And I kept that coral in that little tank in the basement until I was ready to set this one up. So when I moved everything over, I had some smaller established colonies, and I had some frags, but mostly I just had a dream to have the biggest tank that I've ever owned, which is this 120-gallon reef tank that we have in our home right now. Our whole family enjoys this tank. We all participate on different levels in taking care of it and feeding the fish, and it is just something that has been so enjoyable watching it grow. Just having our fish right behind us when we're sitting on the couch in the living room, and just something that I would recommend to anybody that is dreaming about having a reef tank is that you start small and you get used to growing some of the easier coral like the LPS, and then as you're learning you can move up to these SPS colonies and frags, which turn into colonies like that one that you saw in there, and you just can watch your garden grow. And another cool thing is that right now it's the winter time in the Northeast and everywhere, but we get some pretty solid winters, and this is something that we can enjoy inside when the weather is cold outside, and it just keeps some color and light in our lives. So man, having a reef tank is just one of the coolest things. I think it's one of the coolest things I can think of. Let me know if that's true for you as well in the comments below. So thank you for watching Craft Aquatic. As always, we really appreciate all of you subscribers and all you people checking out the channel. This is something that I'm passionate about, and I love sharing with you, especially when it comes to our display tank. And I really hope that you'll stick around for all the videos that we're going to be doing in the coming year. This is our last video of 2019, and I really wanted to wait to do this equipment and tank overview of the 120-gallon mixed reef. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you in the future on our channel. Please like, please subscribe, hit the notification bell. We want you to be part of our journey, and thank you again for watching Craft Aquatic.